This is Ace, and welcome to Monks and Mavericks podcast. Today we have Will from Gutter Fighting Secrets. Will has a certain penchant for the World War II vintage combatives, up to some of the modern interpretations of it. We're gonna get into it. Have a little sparring back and forth. I'm going to tell him that he is not going to win a fight, and he's going to make an argument against that. Will, are you there?
I am here, and I'm reading you loud and clear, Ace. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Fantastic. So let's just get people up to speed on what it is combatives are, and then we'll kind of break down how some of it separates out, so we can get a little closer to what your brand is. So let's start with kind of where the term combatives comes from and what it means, and just get you going.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to be real strict, like an English major about things, combatives, I don't actually think is in the dictionary proper, right? It's kind of,
it's not.
Yeah, it's kind of a colloquial term, right? But basically, combatives, the difference I would say between combatives and like martial arts or the war arts would be exactly that. Is combatives is combat. It's, rough, innate, primal, hand-to-hand combat, life or death potential struggle. Whereas the martial arts are arts. You study them for a long time. You express yourself, right? Like Bruce Lee said, martial arts is about honestly expressing oneself, which is all good, right? If you have years and years to give to a martial art and you want to learn the ins and outs, the foot placement here and your hand sweeps over here, and if you do this, it's wrong. Fine. But don't study all of that stuff and expect to be able to defend yourself on the street against a hardened criminal, or in the battlefield, for bringing it to the World War II combatives, against another trained soldier. So that's kind of, in my book, the difference between combatives and then what you would say martial arts.
So when we're talking about martial arts, we're talking about traditional martial arts, or and stuff where kind of there's no competition, or are we including things like judo and boxing? Everyone wants to talk about Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but we'll just talk with the stuff that was relevant in that era: wrestling, judo, boxing. Would you say that those are classed as martial arts, or that those are more combative in nature? The reason I ask is because nobody cares how good your penetration step is if you can't hit a lazy single.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent question. And I would definitely kind of lean towards agreeing with the gist of what you're saying, is that, look, it's all martial arts, right? You can even call the Defend You or Krav Maga or whatever, street martial art you're saying. It's all, you can blanket it as a martial art. But to clarify, when I say, martial arts, I'm kind of referring to, like you said, the ones that maybe they don't have a lot of sparring, they don't have a lot of contact. It's a lot of, maybe like Aikido, where there's, a lot of different movements, and it's kind of debatable whether it will work on the street, but it's been practiced for, centuries. So this is the way we do it. But an art certainly like, boxing, very effective. Wrestling, in my opinion, probably one of the most effective forms of combatives. Judo also, we know, is highly effective. That's, Fairburne was a judo, I think, second Dan black belt. And William Fairburne was kind of the inventor of the World War II combatives, kind of the granddaddy of, World War II combatives, invented the Defend You system. So, and I'm sure we'll touch more on that as the podcast progresses. But yeah, it's a great question, and I know where you're going with that. And I would definitely say you could classify all of it as martial arts. But in my book, just personally kind of reflecting on it, things like judo, wrestling, boxing are definitely more combatives than a traditional art.
So would you say that combatives is it's a list of specific techniques, or it's more a mindset that is taken towards solving the problem?
I would say that combatives is a good term to describe an all-encompassing way of teaching and thinking and operating. I would say that combatives is done with a mindset to injure, maim, kill, destroy, whereas, the other martial arts would be done with a mindset of preserving tradition and, teaching not only war arts, not only hand-to-hand combat, but also philosophy and other things, whereas combatives is strictly kind of a, battlefield or street situation where you need to, with aggression, execute these strikes and either, go into your enemy or, pull away from your enemy.
You talked about philosophy and stuff like that being passed down through martial arts. There's certain practices, martial arts, yoga is another one, where it's just amusing to me that the guy that's been punched in the head a whole bunch and is teaching me how to not get punched in the head also wants to give me life advice, which, depending on how much he's been punched in the head, is varies in quality.
For sure.
You know? Like
no, that's funny.
I don't ask a plumber for financial advice or like how to fix my marriage, right? I want him to come over and I want him to plumb my house because that's what he knows. But apparently, when we start getting into things like yoga and some traditional martial arts, there's certain control dramas there that wind up turning into some really funny stuff, some very, very interesting situations.
It is that whole Sifu and, or teacher and student relationship, as far as the traditional martial arts goes, it's always been kind of funny to me because there is definitely that hierarchy. There is definitely that, look, I'm the teacher, you're the student thing. Whereas, you go to maybe, let's just say, I think Lee Morrison is somebody many people are familiar with in the combatives world. Very famous, British guy.
Shout out to UC or Urban Combatives over in the UK. Some of you brothers over in Wales.
And he's a great guy. And I actually had him on the podcast last summer. So for you guys, quick shameless plug for you guys who are interested in that. Gutter Fighting Secrets YouTube channel. It's free for everyone to listen to. But if you go to a UC combative seminar, right, Lee's not going to be giving you life advice for how to date or live with your family or whatever the heck you're doing. He wants to teach you how to control and dominate your enemy. That's all he wants to teach you to do. And he's happy when he's done that. But yeah, then you go to a kung fu class and the guy wants to reflect on how to be polite to people and philosophy of, ancient China or whatever. It's a whole different ballgame.
Well, and I mean, if what we're going there for, if the product we're looking for is esoteric Asian philosophy communicated through Yoda-like riddles, cool.
Right.
If we're there solely because we want to survive prison, I don't really care.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, it's just interesting to see how some of the manipulation and stuff like that has been structured. It's kind of been built into it. That whole, I find with more traditional martial arts, you tend to attract a personality type in which they're very much into that senpai seihing sort of thing, in which it's like, I have been here for 3 months longer than you, therefore I am a better human being in all aspects. And it's just really weird. Way back when I've done martial arts and stuff like that for about 20 years. And then before that, as a kid, I did a little of this, did a little of that. And so a couple of years back, I went to a Wing Chun studio because I just wanted to, okay, right, what here is applicable and what here is going to be kind of useful to me. And some sensitivity, and there's some neat stuff in that that exists in that range. If you can wrestle, if you can wrestle and you can box, and you add a little bit of Wing Chun in there, you can make that work pretty effectively.
Yeah.
So I'm working with, I don't know, a mid-level student, right, to senior level student, and we're just kind of learning this drill. And I'm there. I've emptied my cup. I'm just trying to do what they're doing exactly right. I'm not trying to bring my own stuff in. I want to do exactly what they're doing. And so we're going through and doing this thing, and the kid cheap shots me in the ribs. I just kind of like, I was like, oh. And so I just like lean over to him. I'm like, just because it's my first day here doesn't mean it's my first day ever, and it doesn't mean that I won't beat the shit right out of you. And he's just like, oh, right, like, and you get that type of in traditional arts. I find there's a lot of that, those little weird games where like we don't fight or spar, and so I'm gonna get away with doing that because like you're gonna put up with it. And here's the thing, like if you and I are mixing it up and you tag me and we both know we're mixing it up, cool, right? Like you catch me with an elbow when we're rolling or whatever, that just happens. That's why we wear mouth guards.
Yeah.
But if you're just like cheap shotting someone in the drill, right, like it winds up just turning into this whole weird kind of power dynamic that is held by a bunch of people that by and large can't fight.
Yeah,
They know a lot
correct.
about fighting, but not necessarily how to fight.
And it's, I'm glad you brought up that analogy specifically of the Wing Chun versus the BJJ, because I did Wing Chun for 2 years. While
Just
at the same time,
so we're clear, BJJ is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. First time I heard it, I was wondering what the second J was. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So
yes,
you know.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so for those guys and girls at home listening, I'm just going to clarify this. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's a hard art to study, right? It's a hard way to learn because you roll in every class, you spar in every class, and it's hard. You choke each other, you come very close to breaking limbs. You get roughed up, right? It's anyone who has been there and done it will know how hard it is. It's very difficult to stick with it. And the Wing Chun it's not so difficult, right? It's not unheard of to go to a Wing Chun class and not break a sweat during the whole class. I mean, not always, but it's not unheard of either. So very opposite sort of ways of training, ways of thinking. And again, I'm not saying every Wing Chun hall is like this, but a lot of them. So it's very interesting to see the dynamics the difference between the two of them. Whereas, Wing Chun, like you're saying, Ace, it was very much like that. It was very much like teacher, student, and then the guys that had been there 6 months longer than you were like somehow an upper class citizen, and you were like a poor slave or something. And then the jiu-jitsu community it's very friendly, it's highly respectful, because you realize that white belt who's got one stripe could just as easily choke you out if you're not minding your P's and Q's, even if you're a purple belt, which is like a mid-level kind of belt. It means you've been there and done it for a long time and you're very good, but you can still get beat by somebody who's not very good. So I think that sparring really teaches you how to fight, right? I always say the only way to learn how to fight is to fight. Whereas the Wing Chun stuff, I'm not saying they're not good at what they do, but as soon as as soon as a Wing Chun guy fights an orthodox boxer, it's a whole different game for him, and it can really throw him off.
Yeah, Wing Chun's interesting because it exists in this very, very specific range. And boxing is, I mean, is on the end of your limbs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so box with good footwork, I mean, boxing can stand on its own if you can control range.
Yeah.
Wrestling is, right? Like wrestling is, I'm going to crash through whatever it is you're doing, and I just need to get a hold of you.
Mm-hmm.
And Wing Chun exists in this like area in between where it's like boxers still have tricks and wrestlers can smash through really quick. And so if you have good wrestling and good boxing, I think you could do yourself a service by picking up some tricks from Wing Chun.
Yeah.
But Wing Chun is a standalone. The way the majority of people train it, it just lacks the stopping power. There's some good knowledge there, but I mean, if you're not training it in a way to use it, when does that come up?
Right. And I think what you're saying is so valuable for people, Ace, is look, if you're going to really want to learn something as far as how to defend yourself, how to really win a real life street fight or survive through, I should say, a real life street fight, wrestling, boxing, those types of things, full contact sports, right? Whereas, once you've learned how to wrestle and box, at least on a very basic level, okay, then you can add in some of that trapping stuff, some of that Wing Chun fast, sticky hand stuff. But I would highly suggest for anyone out there who's, not yet gone on their combatives or martial arts journey, but is looking to kind of like get into that, definitely study, Muay Thai or boxing or BJJ or wrestling or whatever it is, or judo even. Do that full contact stuff first so you can get a taste of what it's like tasting blood and getting roughed up and roughing someone else up. Then add in all of the, more finishing school type stuff.
The just so no one thinks that we're picking on Wing Chun, I've used parts of Wing Chun in real situations, specifically the whole sticky hands drill. I've used that in plenty of live situations where people were not interested in complying, and the situation was just we're close enough that we can touch each other, so my hands are just on the outside of his hands so that I can use that sensitivity, so I'm not going to get popped in the mouth. And so going through and being able to use some of it, I mean, there's definitely some applications. But if you don't know anything, specializing in Wing Chun is not where I would suggest you start.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you on that.
And then boxing is, I'm fond of saying that no matter what somebody does, that if they were to take a year off and do boxing and wrestling, no matter what they did, whether it's Silat, it's Kung Tao, it's Capoeira, it's BJJ, take a year off from what you're doing and spend it boxing and wrestling. And everything that you do will be better. The first art that I belted in was Bujinkan Ninjutsu, and I learned a lot about fighting without learning how to fight. If that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, sense to me.
I grew up in 35 to 40,000 people worth of drink, fuck, fight, and play cards. So, like, I had been in a toss or two, and already knew what fighting was when I did it, and so I was able to go through and use some of that. But it wasn't until I wasn't able to use the information that I gained from ninjutsu and pull stuff off until I went and work with some judo guys, work with some wrestlers, work with some Dutch kickboxers, and the things that they would explain in ninjutsu as an esoteric concept, like you're going to hypnotize him into moving into your hidden fists, your power hand. Well, in Dutch kickboxing, you'll go through and use your jab to get people to circle into your power shot. Right. So if I take my jab and I'm shooting it at the out, so my left jab, if I'm shooting it at just the outside of your right eye, you'll start moving towards my right side because you're moving away from that, and I'm shooting that jab at a way at which you can't slip it. So you can keep moving in that direction. So by going through and creating that, and then firing that jab and that followed by whatever. And I can get you to move into that position, like, or Robert Whittaker throwing his jab cross, right? He throws jab cross to the left eye, but his right kick is following his cross, and he's trying to get you to slip into his kick. That was stuff that the concept of that was discussed in ninjutsu. I didn't learn to do it until I did Dutch kickboxing. There's no kind of recourse. So to your point about the pressure.
Yeah. And in, Dutch kickboxing is an interesting thing too. And the way, Dutch sparring, so to speak, I think kickboxing is such a valuable thing that we could study, right? Because it teaches you how to move all of your limbs. But more importantly, it teaches you kind of how to react to when someone's kicking at you, right? How do you react when someone's hitting at you and kicking at you? So, when you're studying just boxing, okay, you get good at slipping, you get good at ducking, rolling, all of that stuff maybe, but then, what if somebody throws a head kick at you? What do you do? Move into it? Do you lean back away from it? Those are, really extra type of things that you learn from kickboxing, that aren't necessarily apparent on their own, right?
Yep. So, kind of segueing into combatives, a lot of some of the people that are proponents of combatives wind up finding themselves in a similar camp to the too deadly for competition. We can't spar, bro. Like we'd kill each other. So how is it that the way that combatives is done, and you like to do it, and you like to transmit that? How is it that you're able to get that feeling of pressure, uh, of people being under duress, um, without killing each other, but still getting some of the benefits
Sure.
of experiencing that pressure?
Yeah. So, okay. So there's a number of ways that we can work in this too deadly for the ring stuff, which I don't believe at all. But there's a number of ways we can work about this problem with ease. One of the ways that guys like to do it is like slow motion, right? Like you're underwater, and you'll find that when you do things kind of in slow motion, but very deliberately, very intensely, it does kind of translate over, right? And that's one good way to start out doing things like, you're chopping someone in the neck, in the trachea or whatever. You don't want to actually chop them, but you do it slowly and deliberately, and it does kind of, for whatever reason, fire those neurons in the brain and allow you to kind of learn that stuff. Now, you can't just do that all the time, right? So you need to step it up. Eventually, you do need to put on cups, right? You need to put on cups, and you need to be able to take hits. Now, I'm not saying you'd go bare knuckle boxing and hit each other in the face, right? But you can put a pad over your hand and hit somebody. You can put motorcycle helmets on and spar, right? You can do a number of things. You can put those Muay Thai shin guards on and freaking, wear some kind of vest, some kind of, chest protection and cuffs, and kick the crap out of each other. And that's extremely necessary. I think that learning how to fight, in all three ranges, right, which is striking, trapping, and grappling, is so important. And even guys like William Fairburne knew this. Now, when Fairburne was teaching, just to back up a minute here, William Fairburne was a police constable in Shanghai, China. He worked for the Shanghai Municipal Police. When World War II broke out, they found that they really needed like a system of hand-to-hand combat that was better than what they had, right? So the Brits kind of recruited him. Actually, it was kind of the other way around. He came to the Brits during World War II and offered his services. He had been in hundreds and hundreds of street fights. He helped invent their SWAT team. He was on their riot task force. He had like been cut by knives. He had scars all over his body. Real badass dude. He had studied Chinese and Western martial arts like since he was like a young kid. He knew what he was doing. So he came to them, and they liked what they heard. He not only came to them with him, but he also brought a couple of other guys with him. Eric Sykes, I believe, being one of them, and I think it was Pat O'Neill also had worked with him in the Shanghai Municipal Police. Although don't quote me on Pat O'Neill. But anyway, he developed this system that was supposed to be taught in a short period of time to people going behind enemy lines, spies, resistance fighters, people like that, that maybe he'd have a week with them, maybe he'd have 2 weeks, maybe a month total, but not, every day. It was kind of a crapshoot how much time he would have with these operatives. So he needed to teach them basically, right, how to chop a German in the throat or gouge a German's eyes out and hit them in the nuts and get away so that they could, escape interrogation or whatever it was, escape capture. That was really what Fairburne's quote unquote defend you system, gutter fighting system was. It was cheap shots. It was how to take someone who's never fought before, a 20-year-old French girl, per se, How do you teach someone like that how to dominate your opponent quickly and flee and run on, whether that's to the next opponent or whether that's to the safe house? So it's not like there's a lot to it, right? Anyone can kind of learn the chin jab and the throat chop and some very basic strikes and where to strike and be okay, per se in the battlefield, especially when you're taking that element of surprise, right? Cheat tricks like rolling a newspaper in the right way or hiding a knife, in your lapel or something like that. Very sneaky stuff. So it doesn't take, a lot of training and a lot of genius work to learn that stuff. And that's why I think it's really effective, because over my combative career, I've met a lot of people that say, Will, I'm older. Like, I'm in my mid 50s. I don't have the energy anymore. Or I'm fat and I don't want to, get a workout, or whatever their excuse is. Okay, that's fine, but you can still learn basically how to defend yourself. And here's how, right? Very simple. But then you've got the guys like you, Ace, and like me, that are warriors. We're go-getters. We want to really improve ourselves, and we want to become lethal weapons. So we study it more and we go more in depth. And, I think it was Miyamoto Musashi, right? The guy who wrote the Book of the Five Rings. He said to study every art. If you really want to become a warrior and know the way of the warrior, you have to study a little bit of everything. And so I think that, he said it the right way. You have to study a little bit of everything if you want to go all the way with it.
I think it's useful to get exposure to other arts. And what I find interesting about that is you go to one art and they're like, yeah, do it like this, right? Don't, right? And so you go, right? And so, okay, so that's kind of what you do. And then you go somewhere else and they're like, you don't want to do it like that. Okay, well, why? Because it's really, really easy for me to do this. And so then you wind up kind of learning, right? Just kind of in these snapshots, like, oh, as soon as I see that, right? Like, so I go back to my other gym, right? Or wherever, and I'm mixing it up, and that guy does that thing because that's the way that they do it. And you go through and you got him, you got his number. I think that having exposure to other arts is an absolutely great way to improve yourself. But some guys don't have time. What emphasis do you put on physicality?
I put a lot of emphasis on physicality. As you know from wrestling, dude, it's a lot of the
The
time
hardest fucking thing you will do. Yeah, wrestling practice.
It really is. And I was never a wrestler, but I learned, a lot about wrestling through MMA. So I've got a lot of respect for the art because I hate fighting wrestlers. I really do. You guys give me nothing but problems. It's so important, and it is the bigger, stronger guy that will usually win. When you're talking about no holds barred type of thing, yeah, I mean, you can be sneaky and, kick them in the nuts when they're not looking, right? But a lot of the time, it's the bigger, stronger dude. It's the laws of nature, right? And that's why, when you run into this big bodybuilder the size of a refrigerator, he's physically imposing. It's a little intimidating. Whether or not he knows how to fight is another thing, but it's very important to be physically fit, cardiovascularly, and also muscularly. It got to be strong and you got to be fast. Now we can get into the dynamics of, well, how much muscle's too much and how much cardio is too, like all of that. But suffice to say, being physically fit is very important for fighting.
I know I've never finished finished off being in a physical altercation and thought to myself, I wish I would have been weaker.
Right.
I need less cardio.
Right.
And I think that a lot of people that have not been in physical altercations, or the last time they were in a physical altercation was 20 some years ago, because you've known this guy for 5 years and you've heard him tell the same story a few times, so there's no new ones. I think a lot of people really underestimate what adrenaline feels like and what being in a fight requires you to do. And if you're not mixing it up, you will taste blood,
Mm-hmm.
just based on the workload. You're going to taste blood. You're going to freak out. Your heart rate's probably going to shoot above 180, maybe up to 200, and it is incredibly physically demanding. And the better shape you're in, the better you'll be able to handle it.
Yeah.
And I think that those people really underestimate that.
No, 100%. You're so right about that, man. And I think a lot of people probably have about 30 seconds worth of cardio in their gas tank when it comes down to it. I think from rolling and stuff, the new guys who have only had one or two classes, even they're capable of like spazzing out for a minute straight. But after that, guys run out of gas quick. Even trained fighters run out of gas quick, in a serious altercation like that. So it's not to be played down in any way. Like it's you're so right about the adrenaline. It's a way different feeling than doing your sticky hands in a Wing Chun class.
Well, ain't it the truth? Um, so we were talking about Deli Fairbairn and the World War II flavor, and then on the scene shortly thereafter we saw a man named Emmy Lichtenfield popped up, and that would have been the next would you say the next time the combatives was pushed to the forefront in
Yeah,
some.
wow, I'm impressed that you brought Emmy up. Yeah, so Emmy basically, okay, so for those guys and girls again out there listening that don't know, Emmy Lichtenfield was the quote unquote inventor of Krav Maga, the Israeli self-defense system, supposed to be self-offense system. Now, Emmy was in the British infantry during World War II. He served in the Far East, or in the Mid East, rather. And so he would have no doubt been studying something very similar to Fairburne system. Now, not Fairburne system because he wasn't a spy and he wasn't in the SOE or OSS, but it was all kind of the same type of spiel, right? That World War II combatives. He would have obviously learned the bayonet drills. He would have obviously learned bayonet takeaways and some strikes and some takedowns, probably, I don't know, probably jiu-jitsu based takedowns. And so you'll see a lot of that kind of flavor of things, that Fairburne flavor of things, or that World War II combative, spice in Krav Maga. A lot of like the push kicks, the groin kick, and I'm not saying groin kicks are specific to World War II combatives because they're in all combatives, but just that way of aggression, and there's a certain kind of manipulation, especially when it comes to some of the weapons disarms, that really just shows that Emmy learned a lot of what he was teaching later on in Krav Maga in the British Army. And I know that he was a champion, I think, wrestler and judo player as well. So he definitely learned a lot about that. But yeah, it's Krav Maga was kind of one of the next iterations, at least one of the next very popular iterations of street self-defense. Now, I don't mean to get on a tangent here, but I got my Krav instructor certification a couple years ago. And I was really disappointed kind of with how the systems turned out. A lot of it has turned into marketing. A lot of it has turned into, how do we make money with this? But in its roots, in its essence, Krav is a very aggressive, very effective system.
Well, and it's the research that I could find on Emmy was that a lot of right, and my exposure to Krav, modern Krav kind of reflects differently, but the initial stuff was a collection of tricks from wrestling and boxing.
Yeah, yeah,
Right,
and
like
a lot of
here's
it,
the basics of wrestling and boxing, and here's a bunch of dirty tricks
right?
to kind of sneak in there, and kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, a lot of these, World War II systems are based on wrestling and boxing. The Pat O'Neill system, which is kind of an offshoot of Fairburn system, is based on wrestling and boxing. Even the Fairburn, Sykes Applegate system, if you want to call it that, is pretty much also based on, boxing and judo, or, also definitely some wrestling in there. So I think that, boxing and wrestling, that classic combination, what were we teaching our guys? in World War One. It was boxing and wrestling. It's just the most classic Western style of combat that you can encounter, but it also happens to be probably the most efficient and effective way of learning how to fight. You learn that orthodox boxing stance. You learn how to throw some hands, how to move, and you learn also how to get in on a mother flower and take him the hell down. You know, whether that's a double, whether that's a single, whether that's all the fancy wrestling things, the whirl wizard banger, whatever it is. You learn how to move and you learn how to be aggressive. So I think that that's why so many of these more Western systems or styles are all based on that, striking grappling platform.
Well, it worked, right?
Certainly worked then, and it works now.
So where is it that where's the combative starts to oh, I kind of have a beef with groin kicks, um, partly because I don't think that they work.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that comes from having, in several instances, teed someone up that was adrenalized or on some type of cocktail of stimulants and barbiturates, and they in some cases just growled at me. In other cases, were just kind of offended. And my beef with groin kicks is they work on the people I don't need them to work on.
Well said.
Which is a lot of techniques, right? So um, you grabbing hold of my finger, right? If I'm just kind of a pansy, you're going to steer me all over the place, small circle jujitsu style. Wally J is going to get an erection in his grave. That's great. But groin kicks and finger locks are one of those things where uh, it seems like they'll really, really work because we practice them and we think about them in terms of doing it on somebody that isn't adrenalized. I've kicked people in the nuts and it wasn't effective. And I've broken people's fingers, and in some cases they squeal and cry, and in other cases they just kind of like looked at me. And I know their fingers broke because I felt it and they were crooked. And so it's one of those things where groin kicks and finger locks, there's a certain amount of pain compliance that goes into it, just like pressure points, right? Like I have a substantial amount of nerve damage. You can go through and take your thumb and dig it in any of the pressure points on my neck that you want to, and I'll just look at you, right? Like I feel the pressure, it's uncomfortable, but it's not effective, and there winds up being this stock winds up getting put into techniques that work on people you don't need them to work on.
Yeah. Yeah, well said, bro. It's so true that, look, these techniques, if you want to even call it that, because a groin kick is just obviously an innate human thing. It just takes somebody telling you, oh, kick him in the nuts, to like think about it, right? But these techniques should never be, in my opinion, should never be used on its own, especially, pressure points, which I think is honestly some of the stupidest stuff I've ever heard. I think that if you really put stock into pressure points, well, then why aren't they teaching it to cage fighters? Why are we not seeing this used in MMA? And don't give me that crap about, well, it's so deadly or it's so serious or, you need the right opportunity. Like, no, like, yeah, it hurts if you press in someone's, clavicle, right? Like, and if you're being cooperative with each other, the other person will buckle to their knees. But if you're not and you're hopped up on adrenaline or you're on drugs or whatever, yeah, like you said, you can kick someone square in the nuts and they're just gonna kind of like get upset. So
what is it like? The question I always like to ask is, what is it that we've done, right? Like the thing that you've just done, say it's a kick in the testicles. Okay, so let's say you rupture my nut, right? My testicle is ruptured. Cool. What about my physiological, or sorry, what about my physiology? What about structure has less capability for me to do violence in the next 5 seconds?
right.
Right? Like I may wake up with a nutsack that's blown out like a squash ball later, right? But right now, you didn't change my ability to fight. A broken finger, that doesn't change someone's ability to fight. So kicks to the nuts to me are really subjective. Pressure points. Um, I'm a huge fan of going through and hitting people in the side of the neck. I think that it works really well. It's a good way to juice them, but we're hitting them. We're not like the gradual application of pressure to a pressure point just doesn't work. Me punching you in the bicep when you grab a hold of my wrist or something like that, or if I need to shut that arm down and I'm attacking your musculocutaneous, that works. We know it works because, and you can buckle guys' legs from it because I've seen it, but it's also, we're going after some pretty substantial stuffs. For those of you that don't know at home, your musculocutaneous is a branch of the brachial. So if you hit them in the bicep and then hit them in the brachial and the neck, it's on the same line, and it's even more terrible. But we're doing that on the way to wrestling. We're doing that on the way to boxing, and we're using those two parent arts that you and I discussed earlier to set that stuff up. But kicks to the nuts, I just haven't seen them work unless you're going to break someone's pelvis. I find that a straight front kick to roughly where the belt buckle is at the hips to hinge the hips, cause them to bend and fold. Regardless of what somebody was on, they always folded that way. It always created something in their structure that I could use on the way to something else. But I didn't find that kicks to the nuts would do that.
Yeah, and it's got to be done with the right mindset. Like you're saying, it's all done on the way to something else. It's about pure animalistic rage and aggression. That's what wins fights. Aggression. It's not, it's not anything but really. So if you're going to be kicking someone in the nuts, you need to be kicking them in the nuts on the way to hitting them in the jaw and grabbing them up and throwing them to the ground, or whatever, series of techniques comes to your mind at that moment. But it needs to be done as, hate to say it like this, but as a chain of attacks. You need to always never just rely on one technique, right? It's savagery. It's you're going into this guy, you're going through him, you want to put him on the deck, and you want to finish him off. That's all there is to it. You want to do it quickly.
Run the chain, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what is, or so when was it that where was it we started seeing things change after Emmy Lichtenfield with Combatives?
Things went through a weird time. Okay, so keeping judo and wrestling and boxing and these things out of it for a while, right? You had like the 1970s and 80s where it was all of this like taekwondo, aikido, jumping, spinning kicks, and all of this stuff. People legit thought that that's like the way to fight. People legit thought that that was really cool stuff. Even a more effective art, Okinawan karate, right? People were studying that, and yeah, you can kick someone's ass who doesn't know how to fight if you're an Okinawan karate guy. Even if they do, it can be an effective art. But it went through a weird thing, and then in the 90s, you kind of had this resurgence of like hand-to-hand combat, military hand-to-hand combat. Started coming back a little bit, and then more in the 2000s, you had MMA come on the scene, right? Jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, cage fighting, and people started to kind of see like, oh, wow, like this is what works and this is what doesn't. It kind of disproved all of that, Budokan, freaking Shaolin Kung Fu, like all of that stuff. Okay, well, if it works, let's see if it works. Let's bring it in that cage. And don't give me that crap about it's too deadly to work, because, if you can make it work, you can make it work. If you can't, you can't. So I think that the whole MMA thing really kind of started to act as a proving ground, and guys started to see, hey, this is what works, this is what doesn't work, this is, whatever. So then take it from there. A lot of that nonsense that you saw that was involved with hand-to-hand combat, like, the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, started to get purified from it. It started to get released from it, and you started to have more and more kind of effective techniques running into it. And then, like you were saying, you had systems like scars come in the mix and all of that stuff, which is debatable, the ethicality of it and stuff. But everyone's always got a new system. But when it comes down to it, General Mattis, Mad Dog Mattis, had a good saying about war and about combat. He said, "There's nothing new under the sun." So really, what it is all combatives is all for taking from other martial arts that have already been around, right? It's all about mindset and keeping it simple and savage is really how I think the best way or the best methodology to train yourself as a warrior would be. Keep it simple, keep it savage. Remember that you want to, go through your opponent, you want to kill him, and that, that's really how you kind of have to be thinking about this stuff.
The going through and finding a collection of dirty tricks. Chael Sonnen, in an interview or one of his rants, Chael likes to just talk to a camera, and it's actually pretty entertaining sometimes. But he was going through and saying, you want to learn how to, he said, how to defend yourself. He said, you want to be effective in MMA. He said, go to a boxing gym, learn a bit of boxing, and ask the coach about like what dirty tricks are in boxing. He said, and then start practicing those. He said, and then go to a wrestling club and kind of wrestle a little bit and like find out like what's the stuff when you do it, guys like, this guy's a dirty fighter. Mm-hmm. He said, and then write those down and practice them. He said, and you get a collection of dirty tricks that are going to work on the bigger, better bad guy.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's like we were talking about earlier, man. You want to learn how to fight first, then add the dirty tricks in. That's how I really legit think about it. Because you can learn the dirty tricks, but then when you come across someone like you, bro, who's been wrestling and doing all these other martial arts, you're going to get your ass beat, right? Because just because you know how to like eye gouge someone or knee him in the balls does not mean you know how to fight. It means you know how to defend yourself, so to speak. But if you want to like legit learn how to fight first, learn the footwork, learn how to get in on someone, learn all that stuff, then add the dirty tricks in later.
I would agree. I'd also like to qualify your statement. I'm okay at fighting, but I get my ass beat all the time by guys that I train with, and that's why I train there. And going through and training at that MMA gym, working against bigger, better, bad guys, knowing what that pressure is, like me going through and fighting and like wrestling or sparring with Tanner Boser, who's in the UFC, anything that I get is because he lets me get, right? That guy has picked me up and Zangief style slammed me gently. Like going through and to those places, whether it's a jiu-jitsu gym or an MMA gym or a kickboxing gym, and just kind of mixing it up a little bit, for me is one of the most humbling experiences and one of the most important things somebody can do in their self-defense training, because you realize the caliber of people that are actually out there. Because otherwise you're going through and you're going through and kind of make believing that this is going to work without ever having an idea, and you've never felt real pressure.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. Is that no matter how good of a fighter you are, there's always somebody out there better. But to that point, look, guys like you and I, we're not professional cage fighters, right? Like we probably train a lot more than most people, but these guys who are professionals spend hours and hours a day training. And not only do they spend hours rolling and doing pad work and sparring, they're also in the weight room. They're also doing the road work. Like they're fucking machines, man. So there's always going to be someone out there more dangerous than you. Now, the comforting thing about this is generally killers don't start crap on the street. Generally, killers know they're killers, and they're not going to use any of that stuff unless they really have to. But it is a very good thing to humble yourself. And I get humbled all the freaking time in the MMA gym, like you're saying, because there's always professional fighters out there. There's always people who are just having a better day than you, right? There's always people who are having a better month than you. And, you know, all it takes is, like you said, one throw, right? One throw and you get messed up, or one whatever. It really is so humbling. And like you said, the pressure too. You need to feel what it's like to have a grown man, you know, straddling on your chest and wanting to beat your face in. Because I don't care how many, you know, bridge and rolls you've done, it's not going to be the same, man. You can drill all you want, but drilling is drilling. And really being in a physical altercation is something completely different, and it's so chaotic.
Yeah, it winds up being a different kettle of fish. That's for sure. And I also think that going through and getting some rolls in, and I mean, if you're in the right gym, nobody's actually trying to kill you when you're rolling.
Right.
Going through and just dealing with that comfort level, right? Like somebody's dominating me and this is uncomfortable. And I mean how tiring and exhausting that is because you're anxious and you're emotionally freaking out the first time it happens. Right? There's guys that are, you know, CrossFit Games level athletes that would go to wrestling practice and they'd be pooped. And it's not because they don't have what they need in the gas tank. It's because they're doing something they're really bad at, and there is now this interpersonal conflict. You are, at least to some level, standing across from somebody or tussling with somebody that is going to be pretty close as strong as you are and is trying to at least simulate murder on you.
Yeah.
Fighting is this really weird territory where it's this skill set that it's difficult for. How many guys do you know that you've chatted with and they're like, you know, if I got in that get in a situation, like, honestly, I just get my ass kicked, right? Like, it would be pitiful. I would get beaten so badly it would be beyond words. And quite frankly, I would probably just suck the guy's cock to get out of it, right? Like, how many times you heard someone say that?
Yeah, rarely.
Here's the thing: if a lot of guys were honest, that's what they would say.
Yeah.
Fighting is this weird thing in which we seem to forget as men that it's a perishable skill set. If the last fight you were in was like 25 years ago, and like you've just gotten like a few like stare downs, guys, like you're lucky those stare downs didn't go somewhere because you didn't, like, when was the last time you put your hands on someone?
Yeah.
Right. The other thing is there seems to be this idea that we are just born with this skill set. And, you know, like this demon, I just summon up this demon inside me, and you don't know my mentality. Well, here's the thing. If we use a comparison to like drywall, how hard's hanging drywall? I mean, it's just going through and like gluing and screwing, right? Well, there's a big difference between somebody that hangs drywall as their job or has been doing it as a side job for, you know, 5 years, right? Like, right, a couple times a month, they pick up a drywall gig with their buddy, and they've been doing that for 5 years. The quality of work that they're going to do versus a guy that's never done it before or hasn't done or did it like 20 years ago, the level of product that they'll put out when you go through and look at how it was hung, how it was mudded, how it was taped, is going to be completely different. Mm-hmm. So it's not like the guy who, you know, drywalled once 20 years ago doesn't believe he's going to do the same level of quality that these guys that do it a couple times a month or do it as their 9 to 5. But fighting seems to be this different thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a great analogy, man, about the drywall. I've never heard that, but that's actually a really great analogy. Yeah, so
have you seen shitty drywall work?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
not so much to be honest with you, man, but it's
Okay.
the type of thing where I can imagine
Yeah.
no matter what, I mean, no matter what analogy you want to use with that, right? If you don't do it a lot, or if you've never done it or done it once, you're not going to be nearly as good as the guy who does it all the time or does it sometimes. It's just the way of it. And with fighting, you're so right. There does seem to be a lot of most men that think, oh, well, I watch UFC on TV. So, like, I know these moves. Like, I could Kimura somebody. No, you can't, man. Like, I mean, maybe you could get lucky, right? But, like, if you're going up against somebody who rolls all the time, you're screwed. Or even just, a two-stripe white belt that's been going for, 6 months or whatever. Yeah, it's a lot different than you think. And there's a lot of guys out there who want to think that they're Rambo in their head, right? Everyone thinks that they're, a superhero in their own mind, but you don't rise to the occasion. You fall to the level of training that you have mastered. Important distinction here because a lot of people say you fall to the level of training that you had. No, you fall to the level of training that you have mastered.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Ace, how
We're,
many times do they say it takes to get something into your muscle memory? Something like 1 million, right? Maybe even more, like 10 million, some crazy shit like that.
so they like to talk about 10,000 reps.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a few obsessions, one of which is the learning process, mainly because I had a whole bunch of nerve damage, and I had to get better at learning so that I could figure things out and break it down. It didn't take me as long to learn everything. And so conventional wisdom, as it's been passed down, they like to say 10,000 reps, right? And so 10,000 reps, 10,000 reps. Depending on what it is we're looking at, so if we're talking about we want to put something into the firmware for fighting, um, or like as a reaction, we only need 10 to 100 repetitions of you reacting to something. So going through and having you uh, one of the analogies that was used was I can go through and I can walk back and forth across the grass, or I can go through and take a bulldozer and I can plow through that portion and I can create kind of a larger effect. So going through and creating some emotional content in your training seems to go through and have it sink faster. So when we go through and we look at coming back to wrestling and jiu-jitsu and judo, there is this, we are working on this technique and we're learning this technique, but then you and I, under varying levels of resistance, right? Like I'm going to start pushing back. I'm going to start trying to shut down what you're doing. And we always finish that class with, we are going through and trying to hit this on someone in a live situation where we're trying to find that gap to put that thing in there. We're getting that emotional content. So I would suggest that it doesn't take 10,000 reps when we can go through and start getting some aliveness in that training. And if, that aliveness is, or if that thing you're trying to learn is that, shot comes in, you slip to your cross side, or slip to your rear side, and you throw your cross, or your rear hook, or whatever your shtick is. If we're going through and moving around, and I'm getting repetition of you reacting to that, or sorry, you're getting reps of you reacting to that stimulus and throwing that thing, that we can quite a bit faster put that in than if we're just standing there static and you throw the shot and I slip and I go, throw the shot, slip and I go. We need to start there, but I think it's the aliveness that really accelerates that mionization.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And I appreciate the correction there. 10,000 reps, 10,000 hours to become a true, um, expert, so to speak, at a subject. But you're so right about that. And that's one of the things I study Bill Wolf is a really respected guy in the World War II combatives community.
Have you
Can't really
trained with him?
talk about combatives without talking about Bill Wolf. He's kind of a legend.
Have you
So
trained with him?
I did, yeah. I did a couple of his battle schools. One was actually out in Canada in Mission, BC, right? And the other one was in Hungary, and they're 5 days. And what he does is he's an ex-special forces guy with also like 20 years on the Canadian police force. I think he was an RCMP, I think. And or maybe not, I don't remember if he was RCMP or not, but he's had a lot of fights. He's had a lot of tussles, and he's also got an interesting martial arts background, wrestling, judo, Muay Thai, things like that. So he likes to really make his longer courses, like the battle schools, really very paramilitary, right? You wake up at 5:30, you do PT, you eat breakfast, and you train hand-to-hand combat all day. But something that really is effective with him is called milling drills. And I think that these are also done in the Canadian Armed Forces hand-to-hand combat program, although I can't be certain. But the milling drills are essentially like you beating crap out of each other, again, with pads or, with whatever, and you learn how to get kind of emotional, right? Like, and you psych yourself up and you go and you execute your techniques, right? You knee them in the balls, you got a cup on, but you knee them in the balls, you grab them by the throat, you reap them down, whatever you're doing, but you're learning how to kind of do that full force. And by the end of the 5 days, you really do walk away with a certain level of just animalistic aggression, combined with very simple techniques that works. And that's one thing that's always fascinated me about military hand-to-hand combat programs. If they're done the right way, with the right type of curriculum and teacher, they're very effective in a short period of time.
So if we go through and we adhere to sound principles, we can get results that are predictable and in a quick period of time. If your technique selection is good, jab cross, palm strike, right, like your basics, and you're able to create a situation in which we can train them under duress, I think we can get results really, really quick. From a learning standpoint and from a training people to perform under duress, one of my big gripes is training being hard for the sake of being hard creates confirmation bias, survivorship bias. And I've been on some courses and watched this happen kind of firsthand. So there winds up being this, because something was difficult, it has value. And then when we start looking at military style training, not to say that Mr. Wolf doesn't deliver a very professional program, he's well sought after. I'm sure he's quite good. Just kind of in general, somewhat I've seen is, in order to get you to perform in a live situation where you're fighting for your life, you need to have experienced success against resistance. And I need to, if I'm going through and I'm working with the local police department, or I get brought in to help out this group or that group, my goal is to create an overwhelming belief in self. I want the people walking out of there to think that they can throw fireballs because they have had success under resistance. Under varying levels of resistance that escalated to the point where it leaves an imprint in them, but that imprint is of success. Because it's the reason we see a lot of success of rights thrown in fights in Canada, it's not just because it's hockey, but it's because we believe that looping overhand right is the most powerful shot that we can throw on a primal level. Just like headlocks, right? You'll see schoolyard kids throw headlocks. You'll see them throw overhand rights without any training. And to go through and get someone to do something that isn't that, we need to go through and show them success under pressure with that, with the technique we're trying to get them to do. So whether it's, spear inside, create attachment point, strong knee to the saphenous nerve, and then a chin jab, we need to go through and have them getting success with that under duress. And if those if the military style programs are being done right, which it sounds like Mr. Wolf's is, you're getting that success under that milling, and you're reinforcing that that person's going to fight through. And then to do that, they'll be successful. I've seen, unfortunately, some of those programs where it's like, all right, Will, you and I are going to swing for the fences for a minute straight, and we're going to see who's got a better chin. In which you're creating a situation where one of us, probably me, is going to walk away with my tail between my legs and not be empowered by that. And I will be more likely to freeze up later. Or you, I mean, you'll feel like an icon, right? You'll be like, yeah, beat that square-headed fella to death, right? Where for me, I'm just gun shy now, right?
Right. And I was actually hearing that one of the reasons I don't know how much pugil stick training they do in the military these days, but they did a study that found that it actually does the opposite of making somebody a competent, bayonet or rifle fighter. It actually puts a lot more fear into them, and a lot more, like you said, it makes them freeze up a lot more, because especially somebody's been on the losing end of that, it really doesn't do any good for the soldiers. And that's according to this study that I was hearing about. Actually, Bill Wolf was telling me about this. The pugil sticks it reinforces negative behavior. And like you were saying, dude, about, freezing up and that lack of confidence that comes from getting beaten. I would assume that the pugil sticks, out of anything else, would really be kind of indicative of that, because it's very chaotic. It's very it's not necessarily like a rifle fight, even though it kind of is. So yeah, to your point, I think you're so right about, you want somebody psychologically to be kind of hyped up. You want them to be in that mind frame of, I can make it through this, which I think is ultimately what we're going for here, is the mindset of survivability. So if you think that you can survive through something, generally you will. But the moment you start turning the gears in the opposite direction and saying, I don't know about this, maybe there's no hope, whatever, boom, that's when, the elements of, whatever it is, of nature or the fight, will turn against you, right? How many times days have you been, rolling on a day where you were fighting with a girlfriend, or didn't get enough sleep the night before, or whatever it was, and you're just not mentally all the way there, and you get caught in an extra guillotine or whatever it is. It's so psychological, it's so emotional, in addition to being a physical sport or system, or whatever you want to call it.
Absolutely, it is. You go through and you look at the scenario that is a weekend seminar, in which there's going to be live sparring at the end, right? Is no different than pugil stick training, where you have a group of, pardon me, you have a group of, say, 30 people come in. None of you know the material that you're about to learn, but some of you will be, like me, 5'8" and 150 pounds. And some will be like you, 6'6", 220 with a horse cock, right? And you and I are now going to fight each other, but you have a lot more physicality than I do, and we have the same level of skill. So you're just going to steamroll me. You're just going to blow right through me. And you didn't really get a lot out of that, because you would have been able to do that anyway. And I just got my lunch money taken.
Right.
And we see, not necessarily, well, we see that type of thing in military style training, which definitely in the U.S. that type of mentality filters down with the martial arts community and the reality-based self-defense scene. So we start seeing a lot of those types of things being made, in which we have this is going to work for, it doesn't need to work for, like as an example, spear. Spear is going to work really well for someone who doesn't need to work for. But if you're 100 and, if you're 102 pounds soaking wet and you're trying to spear an incoming attack from a guy who's 190 pounds with intent, you better have something beyond spear,
Yeah.
because now you're stuck on the inside with them, right? Um, so going through and kind of addressing that kind of red herring, as well as the we need this to work on people that we need to work on, and not people that we don't need it to work on.
Mm.
So going through and structuring training so that everyone gets to be a winner. And I know people in this kind of PC world be like, oh, well, people need to learn how to lose. What's the goal? The goal is for me to create an overwhelming belief in you, right? You to believe that that when you do this thing, that it's going to work,
Mm.
and do that appropriately, right? Like do it in a way at which you're learning an actual skill set, but that you're going to move towards that with confidence and not freeze.
Yes. And it's so important, fighting is it's such a spiritual thing as well, man. And I don't mean to get metaphysical here because it's not about that, but it really is. It's about your personal thinking, your self-talk. If on the wrong day you have to get into a fight, even if you're a trained killer, fighting someone with a quarter of the experience that you have. But if you're, in your own head too much that day or a little down about yourself or whatever, you're going to get taken. Not 100%, but it very well could happen. So it's such a spiritual thing as far as the mental aspect of it. And that's why I say, mental warfare, right? We talk about like NLP and psychological tactics and warfare, offensive psychology, whatever you want to call it. It really comes into play in martial arts a lot more than, your average dude would want to think.
The To me, the real victories are when I can convince someone, right? I can take someone from wanting to put my chiclets down my throat to the two of us uh, walk away in a situation where we both are happy.
Yeah.
Um, and to go through and do those verbal de-escalation skills, a lot of people will go through and say, "Oh, well, like you're just being a coward or whatever. You should just fight them." Those people probably haven't been in too many fights, and fighting hurts. Every fighting hurts, man. Like your hands hurt, your broken bones. You're inevitably going to fall on glass. You're going to roll around and right. You're gonna right your iPhone on your hip and you fall and it tweaks your back and it bugs you for 3 years. Um, for me, those real victories are when I can go through and send that person away in which they don't want to kill me, but they still feel positive. I'm interested how you approach those types of things, but an example of how a really good example of how I was able to do that was when I was working. I was working in a nightclub as a problem resolution specialist. And this guy is drunk. It's the end of the night. We got to shoo him out anyway. And so he like spits on the window or something like that. And I was like, oh, okay. So I grab the guy and he wants to start getting feisty. So I just wrap him up, wait till the other guys get here, and then we send him out the door. And the guy goes through and he's like blustering and he's like doing this whole thing and wanted to create a scene out of it. And so just walked over there because the guy didn't want to fight. You could tell the guy didn't want to fight. He just needed to do that because it was putting on the show.
Mm.
So I walked over there and he went to take a step towards me and I just stepped, right? Just stepped and pivoted out Mexican boxing style, right? And just kind of just touched just touched his hand so that he couldn't hit me, and I did that, and he's like, and I just said, just go home, man. And he's like, well, right, right, and he's kind of getting in this thing, and I do it again, right, and I was like, listen, if I wanted to hurt you, I would hurt you. I would hurt you inside. Just go home, right? You can, right? You can walk away with your head high. You can call my mom a whore if you want to. But if we do this, you're going to get hurt. You're going to lose and you're going to look like an asshole. And if I wanted to do that, I would have done it earlier. But I don't. And it was funny because the guy looked at me and he's just like this sigh of relief. And he's like, thanks, man. I was like, have a good night, right? And so that guy got to go home with his chin high. The next time I saw him, he wasn't shying away from me. He wasn't seething and foaming at the mouth. He wasn't secretly finding a way if he could smash me with a schooner mug, which for those of you that don't know is a 30-ounce mug of beer, like the big A&W root beer mugs. And because that situation was handled well, that guy had a positive experience, and I didn't have to get messy.
Yeah, and it's so important. I like that story a lot. It's so important to remain professional. Not only if you're working the door, it's extra important if you're working the door or doing any type of security or law enforcement or anything like that, to be professional. But it's also extremely important just for your average bro or average chick to be professional when it comes to confrontations like that. I think that people really pick up on the professionalism. Your average dude, when they get confronted in that type of way, is going to get upset. He'll get angry. And I think a lot of that, kind of angry reaction stems from fear of, confrontation, right? But not to get too into it, your average dude's going to react a certain way, right? He's going to give you a reaction. But your average professional is going to react very calmly, very matter-of-factly, and say, hey, listen, can we avoid this? I'd really like to just not have to deal with this right now. I'd really like to just get over this. And, if we could both walk away happy, like that situation, that's like the best possible outcome you could hope for. It's an amazing outcome. But, even if you simply both walk away, even if you're both a little bit upset, it's still way better than a physical confrontation. Because, like you said, dude, anybody who's been there and done it, especially in street fights, they know that, look, it takes one time that guy reaches into his coat pocket, pulls out the razor blade. You got a scar on the side of your face for the rest of your life, or worse. Or he throws you on the pavement, you hit the back of your head, lights out. Or, you get an attempted murder charge, or whatever it is. There's so many variables. Like a legit street fight's the last thing you want. Now, are you going to back down from it if you're defending your life, your family, or something like that? No, of course not, because you're a warrior and you know that. But being a warrior also means that going to war is kind of the last thing on your mind, if you're going about your daily life.
I find in this sphere there's a lot of kind of discussion of wolves and alpha and what that means. And what I find interesting is you look at pack dynamics of dogs, we'll use wolves. When the young pups are playing and the ones that are beneath him are playing and kind of carrying on, he doesn't involve himself in it.
Yeah.
Because he's the alpha. And I see a lot of kind of chest beating and things like that about, like being an alpha dog. It's like, yeah, but you're squabbling with strangers on the internet because you're fragile.
Yeah.
Right? Like somebody cut you off in traffic because they're a retard and now you're tailgating them for the next 5 miles. Like here, like that guy has special needs based on the way that he drives. I mean, he's probably actually retarded, right? We're just pumped that he actually got a vehicle and has some self-sufficiency. But you're now right. You're now tailgating them in your big truck for the next 5 miles.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're an alpha, and to me, it's one of those things where being polite is incredibly important. Being a polite and firm, giving people an opportunity uh, to remove themselves from a conflict while saving face.
Yes,
Um,
yes. That saving face is a very important aspect of what you just said, and I know you know it, but just for your
mhm.
listeners, I really
Yep.
want to reiterate that because it's so on point. When you give a person the opportunity to save face, you're giving them more than just an opportunity to save it. You're giving them an out. A lot of people really don't want to fight when it comes down to it. And in that situation that you brought up on the door, the guy knew that he had met his match. Like he instinctively knew it, and then when you told him, he knew it again. So you gave him the out, and he was so appreciative of you giving him that opportunity to walk away with his head held high that the next time he saw you he was like, oh hey man, like you're that dude, you're that cool dude, you get it, you're on my level, like we both understand it, insider club type thing, right? And that is so valuable to know that if you can give somebody a way out to save face on the streets, that's going to be worth its weight in gold. That's going to be worth way more than ever showing him how dominant alpha male you are or whatever. If you can arrange it so that neither of you have to fight, but you both kind of look tough, that's like the best outcome you could have.
For for me, one of the other things that I find interesting about that whole kind of black box that is a street fight is I look like a guy who should have the name Melvin. There is nothing incredibly impressive looking about me. I don't have 20-inch arms. I'm just wearing blue jeans and a t-shirt most of the time. There's nothing about the car that I drive, the way that I dress, that indicates that I have any level of proficiency in what I do. And so for me, I use that as kind of a cautionary tale to myself.
Yeah.
I don't know who that person is. I just don't. Here, there was an incident a couple of years back where a guy who was a UFC fighter got in some type of a incident some type of road rage incident, and the guy ran him over.
Mm.
Guy got in his car and ran him over. Didn't matter how good your spinning wheel kick was. Didn't matter what your fight record was. That guy's dead. And vehicles are real weapons.
Yeah, they certainly
And
are. I'm
well,
glad you brought that up. You know, I was leaving my MMA gym yesterday, and as I was leaving, in walks a friend of mine. I'm just going to use his first name, Dylan. He is a very proficient, high level Brazilian Jiu Jitsu brown belt and Muay Thai instructor. Young guy. He looks like he does nothing except sit on his couch, eat Cheetos, and watch anime. He's got a little bit of a dad bod, right? You wouldn't know that he's this high level killer. If he wanted to fight you, he could kill you in less than 30 seconds, easy. But maybe not you, Ace, but your average person, he could destroy them. You
oh, I'm
would
sure he'd take my lunch money too.
he would never um, he would never even like yell at you though. He's so mild mannered, right? So it's a guy like that let's just say, I'm again wanting to display my alpha male superiority and, try to pull him out of his car and beat his face, right? Okay, like I can do that, but I'm gonna be dead, like on the ground. He'll probably break my damn back, man. And you would never guess. So I was kind of thinking to myself yesterday, like, dude, like you really got to be very respectful and very polite to people because you don't know what they've been through. You don't know what kind of experience they have, what kind of training they have. They could be a freaking, ex special, secret squirrel, and you just don't know. But meanwhile, they've killed like 3 Talibans, and to hurt you would be nothing for them. So, yeah, I think that's a great point that you raise about being being as respectful as you can to other people and realizing that just because they might not look like much, they could hurt you. It's not without the realms of possibility.
Well, and then, I mean, the other side of it is you might just get shot in the wiener with a 25 Colt, and
Yeah.
that changes your life, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. Or like you
going
said,
through
with
and
the
tangle
car,
with
the guy
what's
over.
that?
Like you said, with the vehicle, right? Running somebody over. It doesn't matter how good at hand-to-hand combat you are. You just got ran over by a vehicle.
Well, and I mean, you and I getting little Donnybrook, and you beat the Jesus out of me, but you don't realize that I have hepatitis and AIDS,
Yeah, there's that too.
and now we both have hepatitis and AIDS.
Right. Right. Yeah, and those are legitimate things that you got to think about before you get all like, proud and tough. These are all considerations, that anyone who has really kind of been through it has, realized over the years, right? School of Hard Knocks or just whatever, that people are dangerous animals and you don't want to mess with them, man. You'd rather just leave them alone. You wouldn't want to corner a wild raccoon, right? Because maybe the thing's got rabies, maybe the thing claws your freaking eyes out, like whatever happens. A smart man doesn't corner a wild animal. Well, a smart man also doesn't fight a stranger. It's never going to turn out well. Even if you get the better of him and you end up beating him and then you get arrested for that, you get an assault charge, you go to jail, you freaking can't get a job after that. Whatever rights you had were taken away. It spirals. So it's just never good to get into altercations that you don't have to.
I would 100% agree. Um, what do we got in the works? What's going on
So
in the background? Big projects? You doing a house reno? You got more stuff with gutter fighting secrets?
yeah, we just put out 2 audio programs that are available for direct download, and you can also order the physical CD if you're old school like me. The 2 are Seduction Secrets. So, this comes from a past of myself. I was overweight as a kid. I was not the physical guy that you see now before you. So I really kind of had to learn a thing or two about being charming, about being, you know, uh, capable at talking to people. So when I say seduction secret, it's not all like, I don't know if guys out there are familiar with the mystery thing where you go and it's like how to pick up chicks. Yeah, a lot
Are
of it
you
is
a Ross Jeffries guy?
no, I know Ross. I know speed seduction, but I don't necessarily use a lot of NLP when I'm talking to people, just because it's actually kind of difficult to pull off from my experience. But yeah,
You have to
we
be
just
really, really
released
good
that.
at it.
Sorry to cut you off. What was that, man?
I said it's one of those things where you have to be really, really good at it, and to go
Yeah.
through and do it in a way that doesn't seem overly terrible. And yeah,
And obvious, yeah. And another CD, this ties in actually perfectly. Another CD that we put out, again, available for direct download, or if you want to order the thing like, like me, like an old school guy, is counter manipulation secrets, right? And we talk extensively about NLP in there. And one of the things, and I'm just going to give this away for free, is that when you're using NLP, like you're talking to someone, you want them to get to them to do something for you, maybe like in an espionage situation where you're trying to recruit somebody to give you information or whatever it is. NLP is something that is used for that type of situation. But something that you don't really hear in like, hypnosis school or whatever is a lot of the time, if you use it when somebody is maybe inebriated or distracted, is when you can really start to sink those hooks into their mind, right? Really get in their subconscious mind and start working. Whereas if say some NLP lines to me right now and we're talking about it, I'm going to be like, hey, what are you doing, man? Like, I know what you're doing. But if I've had 6, 7 beers already and we're talking about something else, but you use some embedded commands, it's going to work a lot better. So those are the types of kind of sneaky street fight tricks that we bring to seduction and NLP and mental warfare that I think is so important to know these days, because like we were talking about, you don't want to fight. You don't want to get in a physical altercation, but we all fight every single day with our words, with our energy, and it goes on whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not. So you might as well learn a thing or two about how to defend yourself physically. I'm sorry, emotionally and psychologically and spiritually even too. A lot of guys out there, I've seen it, ex-SAS guys or MMA fighters or whoever, tough guys, but then they're like afraid of their girlfriend when she calls. Where are you? What are you doing? Right? You need to be kind of able to defend yourself in all areas of life if you really want to experience the exhilaration, the contentness that comes with being a well-rounded warrior.
What on kind of the soft skills? What are your two favorite books on that?
Man, so I listen to a lot of audiobooks and like CDs. I guess you could say like CD audio programs. So the first that I'm going to say is one of my friends and mentors, Scott Boland. Quick plug for him, scottboland.com. Great resource for guys and girls and warriors out there. It's actually called Mental Warfare. And it's like an 8 CD program. And I was, quick story, I was in California, living there at the time, dating this girl. She was quite manipulative. And I was looking through a black belt magazine late one night at Borders. And I don't even know if they still have Borders. But back then, you would order things through a magazine, right? They had the internet, but it wasn't like it is now. So anyway, I was looking through Black Belt magazine. I saw this ad, Mental Warfare Secrets, learn how you're being manipulated, this and this. And I said, oh shit, like $59 or whatever, like I'll order that. So I did. And it opened up the world to, seduction and manipulation and seeing really the dynamics of human behavior, the dynamics of human interactions for what they really were. So that's one of the favorite, books or whatever you want to call it, as far as manipulation stuff goes. There's definitely others out there. As far as like the seduction stuff, I would steer away from like the mystery method. But some guys like that. I would say Robert Greene, The Art of Seduction, is a great jumping off point for guys out there or girls out there, just to kind of get the basics and the history of how seduction has been used from time immemorial, and kind of how it is still used today to manipulate people.
I'm a huge Robert Greene fan. Art of Seduction, 48 Laws of Power, 33 Strategies of War, Mastery, right? Like just timeless.
Everything he writes.
Very, very good. What was that?
Everything he writes. Every single thing he writes is like incredible.
Yeah, tomes of information, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then as far as gutter fighting stuff, the hard skills, are you doing seminars? Are you doing all online stuff?
We're actually in the process of opening up to seminars now that the Corona thing is like people are calming down about it and it's getting under control. We think that we're going to be able to start doing seminars hopefully this summer, if not certainly by the fall. We also do offer a Gutter Fighting Combatives DVD. Unfortunately, it's only on DVD right now. You can't get it through direct download on gutterfightingsecrets.com. But it's a good starting point for guys out there. It's not pure water, Defendu, Fairburne stuff, but it's kind of a mix of like the modern Krav, modern combatives mixed with some World War II stuff, but it's what works. So that's a good jumping off point for guys and girls out there. But if you're looking for pure water, authentic World War II combatives, I've got news for you guys and girls, because I get a lot of comments about this. You're not going to really find a full authentic system about it. You're not really going to find a full like, okay, A to Z thing about Defendu, about gutter fighting, about World War II combatives. You can study a lot of it. You can look at the history. You can look at the research, but a lot of it is exactly that at this point, is history. It's a lot just reading through books and going through old film archives, and you'll see how simple it really is. I mean, if you learn, like we talked about, some basic boxing, some chops, some arm bars, some stuff like that, you kind of know the system, to be honest. I mean, add some bayonet fighting, some knife work in there, sentry removal, and messing guys up with your helmet, like you're kind of there, right? So it's not the type of thing like, and I don't take advantage of people, right? Because I could easily make like a series of DVDs, each one claiming that, you know, the next one will hold the key to gutter fighting. But I don't do that because it's ridiculous in my book. I'd rather be honest with people and say, hey, you're way better off learning how to defend yourself, learning how to fight, you know, considering all the modern methodology that we have. Fairburne didn't go against MMA fighters. Fairburne didn't have to worry about people who knew Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because your average soldier didn't. He might have had some boxing and wrestling. He might have, but he didn't certainly have all the training that guys have now, Muay Thai. So you're really better off learning how to fight with a modern perspective on it than you are learning just that pure World War II, 1940s and 30s hand-to-hand combat. So with that being said, I always bring up Fairburne. I always try to keep it simple. I always retain sort of the way that he would have taught things as far as, you know, tough physical training and full contact kind of sparring when appropriate. But I don't want to mislead people and make them think that all I teach is the World War II combatives, because I would be doing myself and everybody else involved a great disservice by only focusing on 1930s combatives.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we're going through and not improving in the last nearly 100 years, right, that would be sad at best.
Yeah, agreed.
I'll be driving Model Ts still.
Right, exactly, and smoking cigarettes, 2 packs a day, right?
Well, makes the lungs strong. Just ask a doctor.
Makes a tougher character.
Exactly. What advice would you go back and give to your younger self? And this can be, you can do it in 2 parts if you want to, kind of related to what we've talked about, only, and or kind of just like advice for life.
Good question. So, you know, this is more for everyone out there, for the younger guys out there. It's like we've been talking about this whole time. Your actions, your decisions that you make and put into action have direct consequences. They will have a direct effect on the rest of your life, on the trajectory of how much your income is, the trajectory of what your level of freedom is, what your, you know, family life is like. Everything that you do has consequences. And I know as a younger man, specifically, this is to the guys out there, as a younger man, you know, you might think, well, you know, maybe I won't even make it to when I'm, you know, 35, or maybe, because I didn't think so. I didn't think I would make it to 35. I never did. So I kind of lived accordingly, right? But you got to think long term, and you got to kind of realize that, hey, if I get up and go beat the shit out of this person and I get picked up for it and I go spend 6 months in jail, or, you know, whatever, you know, I'm gonna, you know, if you're here in America, you're not going to be able to own a gun anymore, right? If you were, even if you're just in Canada, like you're not going to be able to probably get a great job, I would assume, right? So everything that you do has consequences, and everything that you do not only has consequences for yourself, but also for other people indirectly down the line. So be careful, make wise decisions. You don't need to get too hyped up about this, but, you know, keep that in mind, that everything that you do will affect you down the road. Plan long term, kind of plan more for your future, and I think you'll be on a good path.
I would agree. And are you still there?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Okay. And then the last question I'm going to ask you is what quote do you find yourself reflecting on regularly? You might have it tattooed on your body. You might have it on your screensaver.
The quote that comes to mind right away is, if you know your enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 1,000 battles. And that was Sun Tzu. And I think it's so important, like we've been talking about, you know, this whole podcast, is know your enemy, but more importantly, know yourself. Know the way you're thinking, the way you're moving. You know, if you know yourself inside out, mind, body, spirit, you will be a lot tougher of an opponent should you ever need to utilize any techniques than somebody who's kind of running through life like a chicken with their head cut off.
Yeah, Sun Tzu's got such great adages for, and Musashi as well, for life and for fighting.
Yeah, those old books, man. I mean, if we go back and read through them, a lot of it is not applicable, right? Like a lot of Sun Tzu stuff is talking about formations and battle and stuff, but then you've got a lot of what he said that directly applies to your everyday life still these days. And same thing with Musashi. A lot of his stuff in the Five Rings talks about sword fighting, different cuts, different ways to move your feet. But then he's got those gems in there that, talk about, knowing yourself and being still and in the moment and all these types of things that are just so important for us to kind of go back and hear every now and again, so that we can kind of remind ourselves what the real essence of what we're doing is. And I think the real essence of what we're doing is self-preservation in more than just a physical manner, but also psychologically. When you go and get that workout, you feel better, thusly you become more healthy. So spiritually, psychologically, it's all kind of one, right? And that's the old Asian philosophy, mind, body, and spirit, that is lacking in combatives. It's lacking in MMA a lot of the time. But I think if we can all kind of learn that and put it together in somewhat of a package where, hey, you study philosophy, you study a little bit of the Tao or the way of life, of things, and you also know how to kick ass, then you've got a really special person there.
If you're into philosophy and you want something that isn't that has not a cryptic Asian flavor to it, my buddy Quintus Curtius, he has gone through and done quite a few works that are available. He's done like his own translations of On Duties and On Duties, some stuff by Marcus Aurelius. Just like I think he's got like around 10 different publications he's put out. Some is his own, some is translated work with his interpretation. He's pretty solid, and kind of with his cliff notes. If you're really enjoying those types of things, I would highly recommend it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that, on your free time, right, maybe spend 30 minutes a week or whatever, more if you're inclined. But if you can just study a little bit of this every now and again, it really does remind you about a lot of important stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, even if it's just like you're saying, you pick it up, read a chapter, and then think about that for the week, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I just want to say thank you for your time. You've been very generous. I'm going to get this up, and I will make sure that there are links to everything we've discussed below. All the links to Will. Will, if people want to follow you, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, sure. So Gutter Fighting Secrets, at Gutter Fighting Secrets on Instagram. Also, just type in Gutter Fighting Secrets on YouTube. My page should pop up. And we are on a number of other platforms, like I think TikTok, but I don't really upload to TikTok. So you're best off checking out the website, gutterfightingsecrets.com. That will take you to my Instagram link, my YouTube link, and have at it from there. So, but before I close out, I just want to say, Ace, you have been an amazing podcast host. I've done a number of these things, but you do your due diligence, you do your research, and you have so many great points that it was such a pleasure to talk with you about. So I appreciate very much you having me on today. So thank you, man.
Well, thank you. Okay, we're going to wrap this up. We'll catch you folks next time.